Hello, everyone. This is Kim Westerman, Digital Marketing Manager for North Atlantic Books. I want to thank you for joining us for this wonderful event, a webinar with Martin Adams, author of Land. Martin Adams is a social innovator, systems thinker, and community organizer. As a child, it pained him to see most people struggling while a few were living in opulence. This inspired in him a lifelong quest to create a fair and sustainable world in collaboration with others. As a young adult, groomed for a career in finance, he walked right past Wall Street and chose instead to dedicate his life to community development. Through his nonprofit work, he saw firsthand the extent to which our economic system causes human and ecological strife. Consequently, Adams has devoted himself to the implementation of a new economic paradigm that allows humanity to thrive in harmony with nature. His work, Land, a New Paradigm for a Thriving World, is the fruit of his years of research into this economic model and stands as an appeal to changemakers worldwide. In just a moment, I'm going to hand the mic over to Martin, and he will do a presentation, and then we will turn it over to the audience for questions. Thank you all for being here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kim, for the introduction. And we're going to go ahead now and I'm going to start with the PowerPoint/keynote presentation. We're going to dive right into it. And then at the end of it, we will have time for Q&As, question and answers. So this seminar is titled Creating Change from the Ground Up, and there's a reason to it. My book, Land, a New Paradigm for a Thriving World, talks about the role that land plays in our current economy. It is usually overlooked. Its importance is either overlooked or even ignored, sometimes deliberately ignored, by leading economists, professional thinkers, and generally it's completely downplayed. And so I felt in strong need to bring attention to this very, very important topic so that we can have a discussion in our society on how we can share the value of land. So I want you to start by taking a moment to look down. Just, look down. What do you notice? You're standing on land. Even if you're, standing on the second floor of a building, that building is still standing on land. You are bound to land no matter what. You see, land is as essential to human existence as the air we breathe. It's necessary. You cannot live without land. Now, imagine having to pay for the air that you breathe. The thought of it is, of course, ridiculous, and yet that's what we're doing with land. Every single or most human beings on this planet have to pay, usually other people, for the land that they're standing on. And that is the foundation of this work today, that I would be presenting today. Imagine for a moment that you own an island. Beautiful island like the one pictured here. And the entire island has been put into your name. Because you own it, everyone who lives on that island has to pay you rent. They have no choice in this matter because there's nowhere else to go for them. So because there's nowhere else to go, you can set whatever rent you want. Therefore, naturally, you can ask for anything you want from those who live on your island. That really is not much different from slavery. Even if in mere name and form, people are free and independent human beings, if they have to do whatever you're asking them to do so that they can pay their rent, it's essentially slavery. Now, you might not believe that this example applies to us today. You might think to yourself that, if rent is too expensive in one area, I can move somewhere else and be fine and not be beholden to that landlord. But the thing is, wherever you go, someone will own the ground beneath your feet. Yeah, it's like, imagine having to pay for the air wherever you are. Imagine having to pay for each breath that you take if you go somewhere or go somewhere else. That state of existence is unfathomable. And yet, we've gotten so used to this. We've gotten so accustomed to having to pay other human beings for something that we need to exist, which is land. So in our current system, some people have to pay other people for the ground that they're standing on. And that's the situation we have today. However, in addition to having to pay other people for the ground that we're standing on, we also have to pay for community goods and services like public infrastructure. And these community services are financed usually through taxation. Taxes take a portion of our privately owned wealth and uses them to fund community goods and services. So in our current economic system, people pay twice: rent for the land and taxes for community goods and services, but they receive benefits only once, which is the community goods and services. It wouldn't be as bad if you thought about it unless you realized this very fact that community services reward those people that own land, especially the financial industry, through mortgages. Let me explain. Many public services add value to neighborhoods, which is really just another way of saying that they add value to land. Let me give you an example here. Neighborhoods with good public school systems or better public transportation systems tend to be more expensive. In fact, the rents within a certain radius of bus stops and public transportation stops tend to be higher because of the location to those public transportation options. So our taxes are paying for community goods and services, but these community goods and services benefit landowners and banks, especially the financial industry, and that's why banks are so big. Land values arise from the wealth that exists in the surrounding community, wealth that we have created together. I like to say that land values are financial reflections of our interconnectedness. There's nothing that you do or don't do that isn't going to affect me in some way or another if we live nearby. And so if you make your neighborhood more beautiful, that has an effect on me. Say if I own property in a certain neighborhood and you make the neighborhood that we both live in more beautiful, that benefits me as a landowner. Because the land value of the land that I own is affected by what you do. This principle is known in economics as the law of rent. Since public revenues, taxes, pay for these public services, they ultimately end up increasing land values and thus reward those who own property at the expense of those who do not. Renters still have to pay their taxes, and usually the taxes are a greater proportion of their income than homeowners and wealthy people in general. So we're living in a very unfair and unjust economic system that penalizes renters, um, penalizes those who work, and rewards those who don't have to work, especially homeowners. Um, Now, I'm not talking about homeowners in general because most homeowners are actually still beholden to the banks through their mortgages. I'm talking only about very few homeowners who don't have a mortgage, and I'm talking especially about banks who make money from land without actually needing to contribute or help the economy in some way, because land existed before anything has ever existed, and it'll continue to exist after everything is gone. So land will be here no matter what, and banks especially are making a lot of money from land. It would be different if banks would be lending out to business people, entrepreneurs, to business owners to make the community more beautiful and to offer more goods and services to our community. That's different than actually lending money to speculate and make money from land. Now, here's the kicker. The author Fred Harrison, in his book Ricardo's Law, he actually realized that property owners, taken together as a whole, are generally able to recoup their cumulative income tax payments through gains made from land values, while renters are financially penalized through their income taxes. In other words, homeowners made more money from their ownership of land than they actually paid in taxes. So they made money from the community and did not actually contribute to the community as a whole. During the time that Fred Harrison looked at this particular set of data. Therefore, any tax or any public revenue that pays for public services but doesn't obtain its revenue from the value of land is unjust, because it rewards property owners and the financial industry. Now, this picture that you're seeing right now, this is a picture of the land values of Chicago. The red bars are very, very expensive land values in downtown Chicago. The green is, of course, less expensive land value. And this is just a short, small illustration that shows just how much money there is in land. So, what to do? In summary and in short, the value of land has to be shared with the community. I've thought about this for years and years and years, and I can't think of any other way of what ultimately has to happen. This is going to the root of the issue on a material level. If we don't share the value of land, no matter what we do, no matter what fixes we're trying to implement, it's not ultimately going to solve the issues that are unsustainable and that create economic injustice, as well as social injustice for the community members as well. But how can the value of land be shared? That's the big question, of course. Now, it's certainly not necessary to abolish the exclusive use of land. Property owners merely need to pay their communities from which they receive benefits the exact market value of the benefits that they receive. See, this is a very, very important principle. I'm going to read it again just so we can really let it sink in. Property owners merely need to pay the communities from which they receive benefits the exact market value of the benefits that they receive. Let me give you an example. If you live in downtown San Francisco, you have access to a lot of goods and services, a lot more than if you lived on the fringes of, say, Marin County or even farther away. And you'd have to travel to San Francisco with a huge time and energy input. And therefore, land in San Francisco is a lot more expensive than land in the countryside, for example. And so property owners in San Francisco have access to a lot more goods and services. Tenants need to pay a much higher rent in San Francisco because they are also receiving the benefit of living in a place where they can have access to a lot more goods and services. Now, this can best be accomplished through a land leasehold model, in which the land is owned in common, even as it is privately used, since the rental value of land reflects the combined value of all the benefits that people receive through their possession and exclusive use of land. Let me explain that a bit. When we rent land, that rental value is set by the market, and that rental value reflects quite accurately the value of all the goods and services that we receive in any particular location. We know that rents are expensive in a mission, and they may be less expensive Bernal Heights, or equally. So you can see where there's a greater demand for goods and services, the rents increase. When property owners pay rents into their community, they reimburse the community for the exclusive use of land. Tenants, meanwhile, will still only pay the same rent as before, since they already pay for the benefits of living in a certain location. But, of course, tenants pay for the benefits of living in certain locations, not to their communities, but to their landlords. And that's a big part of the problem. So, how can we make property owners reimburse the community for the exclusive use of land? And that is, of course, a very, very important question. Before I answer this, let me actually just allow you to take a look at this photo here, this picture of San Francisco. The rent currently in 2015, the rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco is about $3,000 a month in certain places. Now, if you look at this photo, imagine how valuable the entire land of San Francisco must be. The wealth that's on this land, that's tied up with this land, is almost incomprehensible. It's vast. So most people, however, are deeply conditioned to believe that there is not enough. Not enough money, not enough wealth, not enough value. And I say they are incorrect in their assumption. There is enough. There is so much money and so much wealth and value in our economy that we can easily create a world where everyone has enough, where nobody ever would have to struggle financially. All we need to do is we need to share it. When we share the value of land, we can create a world where everyone is provided for, I believe. Now, I just asked a few slides ago, how can we share the value of land? And that's a very, very difficult question, of course. We live in a society that is deeply conditioned to accept the status quo. Landowners, tenants, ordinary people, workers, CEOs, nobody, apart from very, very few people, are aware of what has to change. Currently, there's much debate about capitalism, socialism, communism, different models, different financial models, different economic models. Even so, very, very few people are aware of the ground, of the value of the ground beneath their feet. And that really is something that has to first happen. We first, as a society, have to become aware of just how much value there is tied to the land. And then for us to share that value with each other. So that process, I believe, is going to be a three-pronged or a three-stage process. It starts with awareness or consciousness. The second step, I believe, is education. And then, of course, the last step is advocacy, legislative advocacy. But it's very important, I consider it to be very important to emphasize that the first step always is awareness or consciousness. Because I've met some very intelligent people with whom I've shared this model with, who somehow in their hearts, who couldn't find it in their hearts to open up to this way of thinking. And I believe their hearts weren't ready to hear. There has to be a certain maturity in human beings that recognizes that we are all in this together, and that what we do to one another, we ultimately do to ourselves. And so I believe it does require a certain maturity, not just education by itself. Once you have that maturity of consciousness, or that psychological maturity, then the next step, education, is also very important, because you then wake people up to having them realize just how much money there is right underneath their feet. And once you do that, their eyes open, and I promise you they will never look at the world the same way again. That particular awakening, we call it seeing the cat, because maybe you know those pictures where there's a cat kind of hidden in a picture, and you can't see it, and then you look and you look and you look, and then once you see the cat, you'll always know where the cat is. You'll always see the cat from that moment on. And so once with education, you realize how much money there is tied to land, and if we only shared that value with each other, we would live in a world where everyone would have enough. Then you see the cat. And then, of course, the final step is advocacy. Once enough people, I believe, see the cat, and once enough people are aware of this process, and also aware that we need to create a world where everyone is provided for, then the chances of legislative advocacy stands a much better chance, I believe. So these are the 3 steps. Now, I'm going to see what time we have. We might have gone through this quite quickly. There we are. If you have, now this was a very brief overview of what's contained in the book Land, A New Paradigm for a Thriving World. It's available on Amazon or Unitism or your local bookseller. Especially read the book if this is of interest to you. Especially consider reading the endnotes too. There's a lot more data in there. So I'm going to hand over to Kim. Thank you very much, and she will take your questions.
Martin, thank you very much for that provocative and compelling talk. Lots of really wonderful ideas raised here. I would like to open it now to questions from participants. A few people wrote in with questions prior to the webinar, so perhaps we can begin with those. For those of you who are attending this live session, please feel free to type your questions into the chat window and I will retrieve them for Martin. But let's begin with, let's see, this is a good question to start with. Is America ready for a paradigm shift this radical?
It's an excellent question. I've thought about it too for a long time. And I personally believe America is not ready for this paradigm shift. At least it is not ready to implement it. I do believe it is ready to start hearing it. And that's my particular work that I'm doing here today, and during other times, is I'm laying the groundwork, in a sense, for a future paradigm shift to come. Let me share one more thing, one more thought about this particularly. America itself was founded upon the conquest of land from Native Americans. So the very idea of our nation, even though it is grounded in democracy, which I absolutely love and cherish, and I love America, I really do, I also know, I'm very aware of the many, many things we have done in the pursuit of founding this nation, many terrible things. And the very fact that we've stolen land from another people is a terrible, terrible thing. And we haven't yet learned as a people to share that value with each other. Yeah.
What are some examples of places where alternative land use rights systems have been successful?
I'm glad you asked. We are actually we are actually starting an example right now in our local community, in the community of Middletown, California. A group of people just recently purchased a commercial property in Middletown, and what we're planning to do with that community is with that property is we're going to construct what we call the Life Center, a two-story commercial building that will provide people with food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare. And what the Life Center will do is that the Life Center will pay the community land trust that we've established for that purpose. It'll pay a market rent, and that rent is going to be redistributed to the people of Middletown that they can then use to buy food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare at the Life Center. So it'll become a universal basic income for the people of Middletown. Best where you can learn more about it is go to my website unitism.com and click on blog, and there's a blog entry about that if you want more information on this particular example.
Another question from a participant: what can people do right now to help move toward this future paradigm shift?
Great question. The best thing that I can think of, and I always encourage people, of course, think for yourselves. What can I do, given my unique skills and gifts and abilities? From my perspective, the best thing that people could do is create awareness around it. It may not be the answer that people want to hear, because people like to generally start doing things, implementing legislative change and creating something that's noteworthy. But sometimes the smallest things can make a difference. I hate to say it, but sharing the book, for example. I mean, I don't want to be self-promoting here, but if you share the book, you can open someone else to seeing the world in a different way. You can talk with other people about the value of land and say, have you ever thought of why there's so much inequality in big cities, especially on the West Coast? And then start discussions like that. To me, that's the best thing I can think of from where I am, but maybe you have a better idea.
Here's an interesting question. How would the tax structure change to accommodate this kind of shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the book Land, I talk about taxes and the effect that this new paradigm would have on our current tax system. Our current tax system really is only necessary because people are hoarding the value of land. If the value of land were shared with the communities, we wouldn't really have a need for taxes. Many economists have proven that. There's even a general principle in economics called the Henry George theorem that says when you improve a community through public works, you can actually increase that land value by the same amount that you or you can collect that land value and finance the improvement with it. So you really don't need taxes if you think about it. You can instead just collect the value of land for the community. I foresee, if we ever chose as a society, if we ever chose to implement such a system, I foresee a world in which gradually there would be no income taxes, no sales taxes, no capital gains taxes. But of course, also no handouts to corporations either. On the other hand, we would have a world where people would rent land from their local communities and contribute to their local communities in that way. There would be a lot more wealth. There would be no need for minimum wage laws, because minimum wage laws are only necessary due to the hoarding of land, actually. Wages would naturally be quite high. Imagine just doing manual labor and getting paid $30-40 an hour, and that's the kind of society we can create. Let me just explain about that particular topic just a little more. The reason why wages tend toward a minimum in the first place is because of the high cost of land and the hoarding of land. If you if land didn't have a cost, um, there would be, or if the value of land were shared, people would have a lot more money in their pockets to spend. So employers would have a lot more money, and they would be chasing workers instead of workers chasing employers. And so when employers chase workers, they have to naturally pay workers a lot more money, and workers can then have their pick. So yeah.
Very interesting. This is a somewhat related question. You've just spoken a little bit about how this problem impacts the economy. How does this crisis, I think we can call it a crisis, how does this crisis impact the environment?
Beautiful. You just need to look at a map, from anywhere and just see how human beings sprawl into nature. We're like a cancer in a sense that takes over the planet. Unfortunately, um, we multiply and multiply and take as much land for ourselves as we want, especially land that's more affordable. And the only reason we do this is because all of the other land has already been taken, and that value isn't shared with others, with us. Because it's not shared, we are forced to stake out more and more land that's on the fringes, on the margins of society, and that more affordable land eats into nature. It eats into the natural biosphere. And so our current system of land ownership has a huge effect on our destruction of nature. I would say it is the elephant in the room that nobody talks about. And I think it's time for us to bring this topic into our national and international discussion and consciousness.
In her introduction, Kim says that you walked straight past Wall Street. So the question comes up, did you intend to go into finance? What changed?
Yeah, I went to college in Boston. I studied, at first I studied finance, and then I studied general management. Many of my uh, colleagues, what's the word? Not colleagues, yeah, I guess colleagues in college, they actually got hired at Wall Street and they started working at Wall Street. Um, for me, I was always uncomfortable with that idea of working at Wall Street. Like I said, I was headed in that direction by studying finance and thought, well, maybe I should do what my parents, my mom was paying for my college education and it was a lot of money. And I, so for that reason, I said, well, I better go into finance. And then as I was studying finance and I went to some job fairs, um, intuitively, I felt a lot of pain, um, chasing after the money, chasing after the dollar, the big dollar. And at that time, I didn't yet understand exactly what Wall Street did and how it was connected to land, but I just had this intuitive feeling that I was essentially going to sell myself into slavery, doing work that I personally wouldn't enjoy, and that work that wouldn't contribute to society in any meaningful way, in my opinion. Now, that said, I know of other people, friends, that work at banks, and some of them have amazingly big hearts. I don't categorically um, deny bankers their humanity, far from it. A lot of beautiful people work at Wall Street and in banks too. So we have to always keep that in mind as well as we denounce Wall Street.
All of this seems to be really tied in with what we see here in San Francisco around gentrification. But can you just connect the dots a little more explicitly and talk about what all of this has to do with gentrification?
Yeah. In a sense, increasing rents or higher rents are a natural process. People are sometimes shocked when they hear that. Hang on, they're like, that shouldn't be the case. But actually, it is. When you have people move to an area, more and more people live in a certain area, or uh, other people move to an area that are, for example, employed in the tech industry, naturally rents will go up. It's a natural occurrence. The how you can um, maybe avoid gentrification is by changing the economic system that's underneath it. Instead of letting property owners own land and profiting from those increasing rents, what you have to do is you have to share the value of these increasing rents. You have to share that value back with all the people that live in San Francisco. My proposal, what I proposed in the book, is to collect that rental value, collect these increasing rents, and then redistribute them to the people in San Francisco via a universal basic income. So as the rents increase, the revenues will increase. As the revenues will increase, more money can be paid back out to tenants and property owners in San Francisco. So a $2,000 per month apartment that is now $3,000 a month, that increase can be offset by an equal increase in the basic income. And then the landlord also has more money to keep the house in better shape. It creates a more beautiful environment for everyone who lives in San Francisco. That's in direct contrast to the current system where property owners make money from land, but then tenants have to kind of struggle to retain rent control, which is a band-aid in our current economic system. I'm not putting it down. I think it may be necessary if we have no other option, but at the same time, rent control comes with a lot of negative side effects as well. Ultimately, it's not the final solution, the final answer, I believe. The final answer, if we go deep enough, has to include sharing the value of land. And that we will eventually have to take to City Hall at some point.
Can this work in a capitalist society, or would it require an economic overhaul?
I would say yes to both. It can work in a capitalist society, and it would also require an economic overhaul. If you think about it, this particular system would actually work very well in a capitalist society, because what we think of capitalism is actually not really capitalism. We think of nature or land as capital, but actually land is not capital. In other words, it's not a man-made or human-made good. It's a natural good that existed before human beings ever existed. Capitalism is based on the free market, or at least the idea or the theory of the free market. And I know the free market has gotten a bad rap for many good reasons. But actually, if you think about it, a free market isn't such a bad idea. It just means that people are free to give and receive whatever they want. And so you can have that freedom in people, especially with this overhaul. I would say even more so, because when land is hoarded, you don't have the freedom. People take for themselves what doesn't really belong to them. Just kind of like a game of Monopoly always results in a single winner. Monopoly is not a free market. The system of land ownership does not create a free market. It inhibits and restricts people's freedom. And so people are forced to pay outrageous rents to landlords who make money off of other people's lives.
What do you say
One more
when
thing. Sorry, Kim, I just wanted to add, I talk about landlords and banks, and just so you know, for the record, I'm not bashing any particular landlord or any particular bank. It's very important. I think that we all recognize that we're all in this together. We're all doing the best we can, the best we know how. And what just has to happen is that we become aware of this and start working together to create a new economic system.
when you engage other people in conversation about this and you meet with resistance or outright naysaying, what is your best tack to take in response?
Hmm. I think it depends on, well, in my case, it depends on my personality, of course, and also on my particular mood. Sometimes I just let them have it. Say, yeah. I mean, not let them have it in a bad way. Just let them be right. Uh, I may not be interested in convincing them. You know, if sometimes people don't want to be convinced, they just want to disagree with you, and that's fine. You know, if that's where they're at. Um, and for me personally, I can say this openly. I don't like to argue. I've never liked to argue, and if a person wants to argue for the sake of arguing, to me, that's a sign that that person just wants to be right. And so sometimes I let them be right. Um, Other times I might gently push back and say, hey, you know, have you thought of this or this or this? And if they still continue down that path, then at some point it becomes clear to me that they're just not ready to hear it. And that's okay. Again, it starts at the first step, which is awareness or consciousness.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have one more question here, and I think it's a lovely one to end on. Who are your biggest inspirations?
Thanks for, yeah, beautiful question. I have a very dear friend. His name is Logan Rose. Um, Him and I work together on this community land project that I shared with you earlier. He's a great inspiration to me. Him and I have been friends for over 7 years, over 8 years, and he's taught me many, many things in life. Um, I've taught him many things too. In addition to Logan, there's also Dan Millman. He is the author of a book many people know, which is Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Him and I have been friends too for many years, and he has been a great inspiration for me. In the very beginning, when I started writing the book, I had a lot of doubts, and I asked him one day, "Hey Dan, you know, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing." And you know, he looked me in the eye. He said, "Martin, there's only one way to write, your way." And so it's because of these two men, and then also my mother uh, and my father too. I'm getting a bit emotional here, but I mean, I'm standing on the shoulders of many, many beautiful people. Um, yeah, for me to be able to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, very, very much for being here and sharing these really exciting and interesting ideas. And I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. I'll be sending out a recording as soon as I can. You should receive that via email, and so you can review all of it or any portion of it at your leisure. And I'll also be sending out a coupon that you can use to purchase the ebook. Again, thank you so very much, and thank you, Martin, and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you.